Welcome, First Baptist Church family and friends. Tonight is our Wednesday Words of Encouragement, and I would like to focus some time on Psalm 63 with this key thought being worshiping in the wilderness. Now, that's not a title that is new and fresh with me. Many others have used it. And I believe it's proper and fitting for us as we think about our time at this point in our day and our age. And I think of this question: are you and I wandering or worshiping in this time of wilderness? You see, Sherry and I love to be in the wilderness. We often joke as we travel along the countryside that we would be quite content living in a comfortable home distant from civilization in the deep woods. We picture our little house in the woods miles from our closest neighbor. Wide open spaces, room for the children and our dogs to run, a place where we could live off the land and off of the grid. It's a wonderful thought, but as we think through that and as we dream, we realize it's quite difficult to live secluded in the wilderness and reach people with the gospel message of Jesus Christ. And that's what he's called us to do. That's what he's called me personally to do. That's what he has called my wife and our family to do, is to reach people with the gospel message of Jesus Christ. That's difficult to do if you're secluded in a deserted and desolate place. I share this with you tonight because it was 5 weeks ago this evening that the deacons and I gathered together in the room right next door here. We prayed and we talked and we planned and we prayed about what are we going to do next? What are the coming weeks going to look like with the guidelines that have been given to us by the governor? Since then, our services have moved online. We've been doing our best to connect with you all through the telephone, through online sermons such as this, by sending letters and sermon transcripts to your mailbox, and just reaching out to make sure physical and spiritual needs are met in our church family, but also in our community. I find it very interesting because probably 8 or 9 weeks ago, and even clear back into 2019, Sherry and I were discussing how busy we were with all of the activities of life and ministry. There was typically only one day a week where everybody was at home at the same time that we could enjoy some quality time. Ministry opportunities, responsibilities, and all of the blessings that come with that. Wonderful times. Activities in 4-H, schoolwork, homeschool events and activities, sports, work, and everything in between. Yet there were points and times that we felt we were so busy and we just wanted some time to be home. It's one of those things where you can giggle now of, will you get or you got what you hoped for? Because it's been 5 weeks. And as I've thought about that, I thought, have we as a family, have I personally, and have you been worshiping in this time of wilderness, or have we just been kind of wandering around trying to feel our way through the dark and figure this all out? Here's why I think this is important for us. Because we need to be refocused. We need to be refreshed. We need to be refined in this time. You see, when I think of wilderness, I think of it like this: a pretty picture, lush green grass, a place to fish, beautiful mountains in the background, serene. I want wilderness to be a part of my plans. I want it to be the way I want it. I want it to be in my perfect setting. It's as if you and I long for wilderness, but we only want the kind of wilderness that best suits us. Yet when I read of wilderness in the Bible, they're not times of picture perfect relaxation. They are times of refocusing, refining, and rehydrating upon God. You see, when we find ourselves longing for a place to satisfy our wants and our desires, we often will take those wants and desires and misplace them in the things of this world. When we should be yearning for a long, deep, wonderful fellowship with God. When we want rest and relaxation, we turn to our weekend retreat and recreation. When our rest should be found in our relationship with Him, with God, and God alone. When I long for alone time, I often want it to be selfishly alone, when I ought to be seeking and longing for alone time with God. So tonight, in our day and age of shelter in place and social distancing, our wilderness, all of this ought to direct us towards restoration, refining, and rehydration in our relationship with God. Psalm 63, David, in the wilderness of Judah, gives us a picture of his heart's cry. And it's one that you and I can learn from tonight. Psalm 63, verse 1 says this: a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. O God, you are my God. Early I will seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. So I have looked for you in the sanctuary to see your power and your glory. David understands and holds firmly onto the truth of God's personal presence no matter where he is. He is consistently setting this truth before himself. And I believe it's at the forefront of his mind because it pours forth from his heart and overflows out of his mouth. O Lord, you are the one who I diligently seek. I know you are present everywhere, and you are a personal God who is powerful to me. And so that's the first truth I want you and I to grab onto tonight, is diligently seeking God. God, you are my God. You see, whether David is hiding in a cave, or if David is dealing with his own personal sin, he understands that God is present with him, that God is personal to him, that God is powerful at work around him and in him. His eyes are looking and longing for it. And he realizes that God is worthy of praise. That's where we get our word worship. Worthy, what we attribute worth to. And so God says, you, O God, are my God, and I long for you. When David is in times of defeat or in times of victory, when he's mourning or dancing, he must set this truth before him. And you and I should do the same tonight. Set our focus, our minds, in the same way that God is present with us tonight, that he is a personal God who cares for us and longs for a deep fellowship and relationship with us, that our God is a powerful God, so that we might see his glory all around us, and that he is worthy of all our praise. His power is displayed in his creation. He provides for us on a daily basis, and he has given his word to us so that we can seek him. That's the truth we ought to hold on to and put before ourselves every day when we are in the wilderness and when we are not. Because God has placed us in this situation so that we would seek him earnestly. How do we do that? How do we accomplish that? Well, the second truth I have for you is early and often. We seek God diligently, 1. And 2, we seek him early and often. That's exactly what it says. Early I will seek you. This should be the desire of our heart when we are wandering in the wilderness or when we're waiting patiently there, and especially when we are worshiping. When you and I search throughout the scriptures, we see that there are times when those who were followers of God sought him early and often in the trials, tribulations, temptations, and situations of life. Think of David in his own life. When he sought God early and often, the outcome of the trial, the temptation, and the circumstance was drastically different than when he didn't seek God early and when he didn't seek God often. David truly had a heart that sought after God. And you can see it in those circumstances and in those situations when he was seeking God early and often. He was literally walking in step with God. And when he did not, he was out of step, he was out of focus, and in most of those cases with David, he was steeped in sin. You see, when individuals are walking in step with God, they are doing that because they are seeking him early and often. The truth for you and me today is that we must be seeking God early and often, every step of every day. But we must absolutely and positively set this truth before us when we are in the times of wilderness, when we are alone and isolated, when the land is desolate. We must be diligently looking for God. And that's why this word here is seek. It means to meticulously search for. It's not this, oh, surprise, here's God. This is what he's doing and what he did. No, it's a dedicated, it's a devoted search to see God at work. To see God at work around and in, especially when one is wandering or waiting in the wilderness. Because when we diligently seek God, and we do so early and often, we will worship him in the wilderness. Why is that, though? It's because our soul thirsts and our flesh longs when we're in the wilderness. Note with me here, he says, my soul thirsts for you, my flesh longs for you. Hunger and thirst conjure up all kinds of interesting thoughts and emotions, don't they? I would often say, I'm dying of thirst, or I'm so hungry I'm starving. They bring to mind and paint the picture of our hunger and our thirsting, physically speaking. Yet when I think about it, I can only honestly think of a few times where I was without food or water for an extended period of time. And when I do think about those times, I can remember and recall very clearly longing for the refreshing drink, gaining some food for my flesh so that the energy would be restored. I can also recall just as vividly being spiritually thirsty and my flesh hungry at many different times in my spiritual life. That's the focus of David here, not a physical thirst or hunger, but a spiritual one. His soul is thirsty for the good and faithful, refreshing, living water that comes from God and God alone. Just as one who thirsts in the wilderness for a drink, the inner being of David here, the psalmist, and for believers that are in the wilderness, longs for the spiritual quenching only God can provide. This is an intense verse. His dry, dehydrated soul longs for the refreshing and rejuvenating fellowship that only God can provide. Also note, he says, my flesh longs for you. You see, this desire, this longing, this searching, it encompasses all of his being. He says, I diligently pursue you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you. These words are placed before us this evening, and they're purposely joined together so that in hopes we would grasp the deep, rooted, and profound longing that David has. It's a longing for a real, lasting relationship with God, his God. And I find it challenging and convicting that he chooses this word flesh. Because far too often our flesh longs for the things of this world. And I believe our time here tonight, shelter in place, social distancing, is a time that we can call out as David does in this psalm, in his time of the wilderness, and say, God, you are my God. I will seek you early and often so that I can refocus and be rehydrated in my soul so that when the busyness of life starts back up again, I will be established in a real, lasting relationship with the one true God of the Bible, who is worthy of all our praise and worship. Here's some application questions for us tonight. Are you wandering or worshiping in your time of wilderness? And then simply answer the question of why. Here are some things that I think you and I ought to ponder on and work through. Is God your God? Do you have a deep personal relationship with Jesus Christ the Lord, which you experience his presence and his power in a personal way that causes you to praise him even in the wilderness? Next, am I diligently seeking God early and often? I ask myself this morning. What do I seek first and foremost each day? What do I seek first and foremost each day? Am I meticulously searching for God? And then, final question for tonight. Does my soul thirst and my flesh long for the spiritual quenching that only God can provide? Work through those questions, think about them, and then do this for me. Make Psalm 63 your prayer, your praise, your petition for the rest of this week. Read it. Read it quietly. Read it solemnly. Read it out loud. Read it in a way of praise. Then believe it. This is personal. This is powerful. This is refreshing for you. And then live it out today. Live it out this week. Grace and peace to you until we meet again. I pray you are blessed, you are well, and you will diligently seek God early and often in the coming days, so that you and I are not wandering in the wilderness. We are worshiping our God in this time of wilderness. Pastor Matt is out.